So we've kind of jumped into today without some of the introduction that I gave on the first days. Friday we started with a piece that featured Jerry back here that I was privileged to create. But the point of the International Choreographers Festival is to get a whole lot of what we just experienced here, all right? Those of you who have been to a couple of other sessions know that the idea to do this came when I was at a wonderful sort of spring lunch in a Napa home with warm homegrown tomatoes and balsamic reduction, and heard about the Sonoma Valley Authors Festival and how excited people were about that. And I said, well, why isn't somebody doing that for dance and choreographers? And I said, well, maybe this is a sign. So I decided to try to do this. So what you just experienced with Robert, we're gonna have again with Traci. She's gonna first speak about her own career and life as a dancer, and then she is gonna tell you a little bit about the piece that she has just created. And then we're going to have Rachel Howard come up here, one of the premier dance critics and writers for the Chronicle, and she is going to help us synthesize. She's going to ask Traci some of her questions, and once again, invite you to ask your own questions. So, Traci Cottam and I met some years ago in a ballet class, so we could say that we met at the bar. She is now the mother of our child, and she creates really fantastic work. So Traci, please come on out and enlighten us.
Right. Thank you for the introduction, Nathan. It's a pleasure to be here with everybody and tell you a little bit about me and the work I've created. I'd like to start by saying that primarily I've been a dancer my whole life, and I grew up in a house filled with music, filled with classical music. My mom was a classical pianist, and so from a very young age, I started. Even before I started dance, I grew up with music, and I would think about dance and how you could create dance to these lovely musical scores. And then I started taking ballet, and part of that choreographic sense kind of left me, because as you get trained, you find one way to do it right. And that lasted with me for most of my very young life as a dancer, and even when I went to college. So I grew up, I started dancing at 8. I immediately loved it. I was incredibly shy as a child, didn't talk very much. And as soon as I stepped on stage for the first time, I thought, wow, this is for me. I belong here. This is where I should live, is on stage. And so that kind of changed my life and my personality. I was able to speak after that. I mean, I could speak, but I was just much more free after I became a performer. And, those young years of dancing, like I was saying, I really grew up to be almost a perfectionist. There's one right way to do it. There's a way to point your foot. There's a way to straighten your knee, and you can do it this way, and you can do it always more and greater, but it's still one way. And then, I was thinking back to hearing some of those wonderful piano pieces that my mom would play. And as a maybe 14-year-old, I started choreographing it again in my head. I thought of this black and white ballet, and I can't even remember to what piece it was to. And I thought, oh, one day maybe I'll make this. And they were all in tutus, and I had every part choreographed, because I just loved dance from the moment I started it. And I've mostly trained in classical ballet. I also had some jazz and tap, and I grew up in Utah, so it's a very musical and dance-oriented state. A lot of good dancers come from there, but it was always encouraged as an art form in my household, but always expected that at 18, I would move on and do something else. And so I did. At 18, I went to college, and I thought, okay, I love math. I'm going to be a math major. And my first semester in college, I did do math, but I stopped dancing, and I immediately was depressed with my life. As a non-dancer, I thought, math is great too. I mean, it's fine. I'm going to continue studying it. However, this is really depressing to not dance. So I joined the ballet company at the college, and I also remember taking a choreographic class. I ended up being a dance major and math minor. And my choreographic class, I remember being terrified by the teacher, by the prospect of choreography. I felt all this pressure to make something completely brand new that someone had never done before. All these dance moves that were completely brand new. And that's a daunting task because there are many choreographers in the past and many wonderful, great choreographers. And to take on that challenge of, well, what's my voice as a choreographer? And I have to say, in college, I did not meet that challenge well because I was still in this mindset of strongly in the ballet world, but trying to do something brand new. My mind was not open to these choreographic processes anymore. I graduated college. I moved to New York City. I danced there for 10 years with many great choreographers and companies. The Suzanne Farrell Ballet I love dancing with. And one of my main gigs was New Chamber Ballet, which most of you met Miro last night. And he worked with me. I think I danced in that company for 8 years. And starting to dance with Miro was a mind opener to me because he always encouraged his dancers to help with the creation process, not in that he asked you to create a solo or something like that, but he would say, this is my idea, I want you to do this, and he encouraged your feedback on, does this feel good, does this not feel good, what can we do from here? And as a dancer, that's wonderful, but it also can be, once that light bulb is open, and if the choreographer doesn't want to go the way that you are suggesting feedback-wise, it can be frustrating at times, because after you open that valve of creation, you have to decide how much do you let out, how much is accepted in that company, how much is accepted with that choreographer. And it's very, very interesting process. So one of my other favorite choreographers I worked with is a guy named Constantine Becker, who danced with the Royal Danish Ballet, and now he creates work mostly in New York. And once I worked with him, he uses tons of improvisation modalities. And I felt like after I started really improvising, a whole new world was created for me, both as a dancer and as a choreographer, which I had not really done any of since college. I worked as a dance teacher, and when you're choreographing for kids, it feels like it almost doesn't count as choreography because it's different. So around 2016, I was commissioned to create a piece just by someone I had not ever met before. She invited me for coffee and she said, I would like you to create a piece for this chamber music project that we're doing. And I was very much embedded in the chamber music world and the chamber dance world through Moreau's company, New Chamber Ballet. And I said, well, sure, but I've never choreographed professionally. So what are you looking for? She said, well, I want to create a piece and an evening of women choreographers, women dancers, and women musicians. I said, oh, okay, sure. So she gave me an option of 3 composers to choose from. And I can't remember who the other 2 were, but composer I chose was Carolyn Shaw, who is a new music composer who's alive today. She's only a few years older than me, so she's creating very new music, but it's lovely music. And I created a piece to her entr'acte, and this was really a lot of fun. It had 6 women. It was called Interorbit, and that was my first foray into professional choreography. And it was played by live musicians. So again, in the same world that I had been dancing in, I created a new piece for, and I was immersed in choreography. As a dancer, I felt like I could go about my day, do other things, think about the choreography in the back of my mind. Of course, as a good dancer, you take the choreography that's given to you, you ruminate on it overnight, you want to make sure you remember it, but that becomes easier and easier as you're a dancer. However, creating a piece, I was all encompassed by listening to the music, figuring out what I wanted to do, and I spent 24 hours a day thinking about it. I mean, I dreamt about what am I going to make in this piece. I took it extremely seriously, and I still feel that way when I create work. So it's fun. But it's all encompassing to me. So when Nathan asked me, do you want to create a piece for this festival? I have created other pieces since that Carolyn Shaw piece, but they've all been commissioned and all with specific parameters. I want you to use these dancers. I want you to use this kind of music. I want it to be done in this setting. And with this commission, the sky was the limit. I thought, oh, this is great, but what do I do? So I went back to some of the old composers I've created piece to, and one of them was from Carolyn Shaw again, and she created this really fun piece called Partita for 8, and the musicians are singing and talking through it and counting, and I was drawn to it because as someone who's mathematically minded, I love the counting background of it. Nathan, do you still have that? Let's take a quick listen.
To the side.
To the side.
To the side.
And around.
Through the middle
To the
and
side.
To the side.
the side.
Around.
Through the middle
To the
and
side.
To the side.
to the side.
To the side.
And around.
And around and around and around through the middle.
To the side. 2, 3, 4, 5.
6, 7, 8.
Through the midpoint.
The line drawn from the
Outland out and around.
So this was one of the choices I had of choreographing to. I did not go for it. However, I still do want to choreograph to that, but it was not for this piece. So I thought this really fun musical score needs at least 10 dancers, and we don't have the budget for 10 dancers. So I ended up using, and I'll get to this a little bit later, but the music by Francis Poulenc, who created a flute sonata that is beautiful. You'll hear it later. But so I started choreographing, and the premiere of this work actually went up in Minneapolis. We did a mini version of this festival in Minneapolis, and I created it on 3 Minneapolis-based dancers. And we don't know anyone in Minneapolis. However, one of my friends that I danced with very briefly there, Caitlin Gilliland, is kind of a Minneapolis dance staple and has moved back there. So I called her and I said, do you have any dancers that you recommend, because I'm creating this new work? And she said, well, male or female, and what style of dance? And I said, doesn't matter, male or female, I'm okay either way. Style of dance, ballet, contemporary ballet, either one is fine. Because I knew I would want to create in the contemporary ballet style, because that's what I have most experience in, and how I saw this piece going. So she recommended these lovely 2 dancers that I started making the work on. A third came into the piece, but she didn't stay with us. Those 2 dancers traveled from Minneapolis to be here this week. And so they were lovely, really open to creation, and I'm so glad I started working with them. Who here knows what contemporary ballet is? Probably everyone. But I don't know. It's a good question to ask. Does anybody be brave? Has anybody not seen a contemporary ballet piece? Oh, great. Thank you, Jerry. So I just wanted to touch on what is, I think we all know what ballet is. We had a discussion on that last night. And like the art world, we went from ballet, we have modern dance. Right now, contemporary dance is very much in the scene of dance. Like Robert was saying, a lot of things look exactly the same all the time. But contemporary ballet is informed by the classical line, but has new ways of moving. We use the floor a lot. We create lines with our bodies, gestures with our hands. That's kind of the style of contemporary ballet. You'll see it. And what did I take as inspiration for this piece? I am an avid reader, or at least I was before I became so busy in the last few years. But I read a book that's one of my favorite called Kafka on the Shore by Murakami. And I read this book probably 10 years ago, but it keeps haunting me. It's a coming of age book of a 16-year-old boy who leaves his father. His mother is gone. He leaves his father and goes on a journey in Japan. And it's in a land of mysticism, this book. So the author jumps from different times, different portals almost. And I thought this would be really fun to create a dance in the land of magical realism. That's kind of easy in the ballet realm. If you look at Giselle, Swan Lake, Coppelia, the Nutcracker, they're all kind of in the magical realism world of, in Giselle, she dies of a broken heart and enters the land of the Willies, the women who die of a broken heart. And you see them and they capture a man and kill him. So that's magical realism. Coppelia, a girl, reads a book, and she is created by Dr. Coppelius, and she comes to life later. Or does she? The Nutcracker, probably a ballet that everybody has seen. There's plenty of magical realism there. But I thought, okay, how do you do this in a contemporary ballet sense? And I have to say, it was really fun to work with these dancers, create a mood, and then I got the great gift of having Mike light the piece, which really helps it come to life. So where did I start movement-wise? I started with a bunch of different musical pieces that I was interested in, one of them being the Carolyn Shaw piece, another being the Francis Poulenc, which I ended up using, and a few other composers. And I started improvising to them. However, what most of you probably don't know is at this time I was about 5 months pregnant, and improvising at 5 months pregnant is a lot different than improvising not pregnant at all. And so I filmed myself, I started creating, I looked back at the footage, I thought, oh, it's a lot different now. But I came in with these ideas in my mind, and I picked a few verbs that I started improvising to. These verbs were to swirl, to erase, of reflection, and of tides. I'll repeat them again just so you can see if you recognize them in the dance. To swirl, to erase, of reflection, and of tides. And I found these verbs there's an artist, Richard Serra, who's a great sculptor. He creates huge sculptures. But he also has a list of 50 verbs that he grouped as actions to relate to oneself, material, place, and process. This language-based drawing was developmental in his early sculptural practice, and I used these list of verbs. I looked through and I thought, which ones are related to Kafka on the Shore, which was really my starting point. And I chose a few more, but these are the 4 I ended up with. I did this improvisational time of creating movement with those actions. And then I went back and found what I liked most and what I thought was most intriguing. And then I started teaching it to the dancers. So Francis Poulenc, he is known as a neoclassicist and for his post-war compositions. His flute sonata I chose because it has a huge sense of mysticism. The flute always does, but I really love this work. And let's see. In it, so I created these movement phrases. I taught them to the dancers, and then I would take their feedback of, does this work for you? Does it not work? Then create duets out of it, trios, different solos. And as I started working this way, I found that I needed more. So, and like Robert said, I applied for a grant and I started writing about the piece, which really is telling because you have some ideas in your mind, but once you start putting them on paper, it becomes a life of its own. And so as I started creating this grant proposal, which I did not get, I thought this needs more. I need more meat to what I'm creating. I had already created about 5 minutes of the work and I could put that in, but I thought there's not enough depth to this. And as I was working with these two dancers primarily, you'll meet them, Maddie and Emily, it started to form a new life of its own, this dance. I had a third dancer who came in, and she came in later into the process, and this dancer was very ethereal. And I thought, oh, I know exactly what I want to do from here. She immediately, as soon as she stepped in the studio, became the past character, kind of like a ghost. The way she moved was very easy to see that the ghost-like presence of spirituality would come in to the piece and back out. And I wanted to lean into that more and more. And so it made me think about the 3 Moirai, or the 3 fates of Greek mythology. And to just tell you a little bit more about them, they are goddesses of fate who personify the inescapable destiny of man. They are usually represented with threads, which weave and cut. They wield an incredible power. They have the task of spinning, measuring, and cutting the thread of human existence, and also of God's. So those 3 are named Clotho, the present, the spinner. She spins the thread of life. Lachesis, the future, the portioner of lots. She measures the thread of life. And Atropos, Izzy, or this dancer was Izzy, and now it is Whitney. And she who cannot be turned, she cuts the thread when it's time for death. Zeus, the god of fate, is their leader. Once I started working with this, the piece really came to life. And Martha Robles, in Women, Myths, and Goddesses, writes, the moon has 3 phases, or 3 parts, or 3 distinct persons in one. The new moon, or the maiden goddess of spring. During the first period of the year, the full moon, equivalent to the nymph goddess of summer, or the second period, and the old moon, the old goddess of autumn, considered the last period. As we shifted the focus to really embody these characters, this precipitated me figuring out a sort of wall of memory that you may see. And in it, there's one dancer who does a solo, and 2 dancers are behind them creating a diagonal line, and I think of it as the line of memory. And I thought when I was creating this, that would be so easy with a scrim if I just, made it not on the diagonal. But our first presentation of this was very bare bones, not lit. And I thought, well, how do I create this in a non-theatrical environment? And so we created it through the body. These dancers take a phrase, they erase, and they come back. And then later on, that solo is repeated, and this solo is the present character. It is repeated again by the future character, and the future eventually overtakes the present. Very excited for you to see the piece, and I just like to end with a quote that is by Murakami and from Kafka on the Shore. Sometimes fate is like a small sandstorm that keeps changing directions. You change direction, but the sandstorm chases you. You turn again, but the storm adjusts. Over and over, you play this out like some ominous dance with death just before dawn. Why? Because this storm isn't something that blew in from far away, something that has nothing to do with you. This storm is you. Enjoy.
Delighted to meet you and see your work. Beautiful, beautiful dancers, right? Everybody, we should give them some more applause. That was beautiful. Yeah. All right. Well, I'll just ask about 3 questions and we'll take it to the audience because they probably had a lot of questions about the ballet itself. I was was everyone looking for the swirl and to erase were the 2 verbs, right? So I love the bourrée and the plie and swirling around. That was beautiful. And then I saw this wonderful little move with the feet scrunching up, and it seemed like they were erasing there, perhaps. I don't know if that was your intention. So here we are. I'm one viewer who maybe saw a bird wing when it was an F-140. So
I think this one, I like it as that, but it came from wave, but it also could be an erasure.
Okay.
So
Yeah. So it was striking to hear you talk about all the layers of influence here, from Murakami to the music to Richard Serra's way of working to classical Greek mythology. So much you're pulling from that's outside of dance studio training. Can you talk about how you think about that as a part of your overall development as an artist, to look outside of ballet to other art forms, and how do you make time for that? How important is that to you to cultivate, to bring back into the art?
that's a great question. Thank you. I find that very important as an artist to draw inspiration from things that are in the outside world that are truly enriching. So, like I was saying in my talk, I'm an avid reader. Murakami's novels are wonderful, and they draw me into this new world. So he's been one of my favorite authors, but I have many favorite authors. When I started to really take on my voice as an artist, I think I pulled from literature, maybe primarily, but also I read this book called The Art of the Novel by, who wrote that? Yes, thank you. Who is another one of my favorite authors. And, I'm primarily a fiction reader, but when I saw this book, I thought, I've got to read that. And that really influenced me as a choreographer to take on one of my favorite writers and how he thinks that a novel is written. And how does that relate to the choreographic process?
I mean, it has a lot of relationship, right? Because he's talking so much about form and how, he likes to write in 7 parts, but some writers like to write in 3 and 2, and how you have this innate sense of form that you bring that's almost like your thumbprint that interacts within what you want to say. So I could definitely see the relevance. So it's Milan Kundera's The Art of the Novel.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference, because I think as a dancer, specifically, we can get into these little boxes where you're just told what to do and you do it, and that's wonderful. And I'm not disparaging that in any way, because I think in classical ballet that really makes a huge difference. But as you start creating pieces and creating work and becoming a more enriched person, you need reference to the outside world.
Yeah, I kind of want to follow up on that about coming out of the classical ballet world. That was so interesting to hear you say that you had this natural impulse to choreograph early in your life, and then you get into the studio and some of that starts draining out as you're just trying to do exactly what you're told. And yet, over the last century, when choreographers have come out of the ballet world, they've tended to be male, even though they're also going through the same training. And we're only now sort of entering this era where we have more women coming out of the classical ballet world, like Lauren Lovett and Tyler Peck. And then if you look at Amy Seiwert, and she's taking over SMU in contemporary ballet now. It's really interesting to me to see, because as recently as a decade ago, you'd go to a major company's New Works Festival, and there'd be maybe 1 woman choreographer among 12 others. And then certain artistic directors would be asked about this problem. And I remember one artistic director saying, well, for some reason, it's just the male dancers who tend to want to step up and choreograph, and the female dancers don't tend to want to step up and do that as much. And I thought, that's very curious, really? So can you tell me, are you heartened by seeing more women step up out of classical ballet, and what do you think is happening in the classical ballet world around that?
Sure. I'm certainly heartened by that because obviously women have a lot to say and should have a voice on the ballet stage. They've had a strong voice in the modern world for a long time. I mean, we talk about modern dance as having the mother of modern dance, not the father of modern dance. So it really is more of a ballet problem, if you will. But we see that here in San Francisco, we have a beautiful new director at San Francisco Ballet. We have Amy Tsai. We're getting more and more women choreographers on the stage here in San Francisco and around the world, in New York, like you were saying. It's very important. I don't know why it is that they weren't as prevalent. I mean, maybe a decade ago, I can't give an answer to that, but I have to say that it's heartening that they are on the scene now, and we should keep pushing in that direction.
And then it's interesting to hear about your breakthrough when you tried improvisation for the first time. You spoke of a particular person's improvisation modalities. Who was that again? And can you describe exactly what would that choreographer ask you to do that was a breakthrough for you?
Yes. So the friend and choreographer is Konstantin Becker, but he was mainly working with Forsyth modalities. And I had seen the work of Forsyth a lot and thought it was amazing. But once I started working in those modalities, it was so freeing to, have no boundaries in the way I work.
So to break it down for people, so it's William Forsyth's way of really specific. What would the task before you be that was new to you?
Yeah. Maybe our first task we worked on was walk, stop, fall, which is easy for everybody. Anybody in the audience could do. If I asked everybody to stand up, we would all have to walk at the same time, stop at the same time, and fall at the same time. And that's really becoming a group-minded being. So that's the very most basic. Another one that we played with a lot was what we called 9 points. If you imagine 9 points in front of you, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And you create a big box like that. So 3, 3, 3. And you would touch a point and then touch another point. And then touch a point, touch another point. And then it would progress from there. You draw the points together. 1, 2, draw them together. 1, 2, draw them together. Can you pull from one point to the other? So those were the most basic ones, and then we got into more crazy ones as we would create work together. And it was incredibly freeing, not only to find different spaces in which you could pull from, but also qualities in which you could push them together. It was very easy for me as kind of a fast, sharp mover naturally to find staccato-like motions. But I remember having this one breakthrough where I was rehearsing a dance that was choreographed on me. No, it was not choreographed on me. I was learning this piece. And the motions that were given me were extremely fast and extremely staccato is how it was taught to me. And then the director kept asking, can you go faster? Can you go faster? Can you go faster? And I said, well, that's as fast as I can go if I make it staccato. And then I had this breakthrough. What if I just mush those quick gestures together? I can go way faster. And I remember that being a transformative experience in my dance career of, there's always more you can let go of, fewer boundaries to have.
And you spoke of when you started to be asked to improvise, how that then also made you need to navigate, okay, what is the power relationship with this particular choreographer or in this particular company? They want my voice, but how much? And you had to feel that out from situation to situation. So now that you're in the position of choreographing, how do you try to form the power dynamics with your dancers?
It's a great question that I'm still learning from as I've worked with many different teams of dancers. So the 3 that I worked with now are really gracious and beautiful. How I created this piece is I relied on their movement skills more so than I have in other pieces because I could not move so much. I remember at one point for Emily and Maddie, I said, I feel like I need you to run and slide on your belly, which I went to do, and I was like, oh, I can't do that. At this point, I was about 6 months pregnant. And then I said, can you do that? And they were like, yeah, of course. But then it kept getting stronger and stronger. I said, well, that's great, but it needs to be faster and longer and more of a big thing. But I think that the way I like to work is I give the movement, I give direction, but if something isn't feeling natural to the dancers, it depends on if I think it's something really important to the piece. So when we first created this, it was with a dancer named Izzy, and there's a moment in the piece where 3 dancers are on the floor. One gets up, the other one kind of puts her foot on her back, and she gets pushed up in the back. And then I wanted her to keep it for a while. And Izzy said, oh, this is a little bit uncomfortable. And I said, well, is it uncomfortable or does it hurt? And she said, oh, it's just uncomfortable. I can do it. And so we kept it. And it's one of my favorite moments of the piece. But if she were to say, I'm going to be injured here, I would, of course, say, oh, okay, let's find a new way or change it a little bit.
Well, let's open it up to the audience who has a question.
First and foremost, amazing. It is the first time I see it in person, dance. But I was just telling my friend here, was I supposed to tear up at the beginning? Because I know dance is interpreted differently based on how you interpret dance. But at the beginning, it felt so, to me, it felt very, like it opened up something within me. So at first I teared up. It was very intense and it got to me. So I think if dance does that, then something in the choreography or everything in the choreography was incredible. So I wonder, for you professionals, was I supposed to cry? Is that normal?
I'll first say crying is always welcome. But maybe we can ask the dancers, what do you feel when, emotion is felt by the audience?
That's really nice to hear. I think as dancers, our goal is to always connect with an audience, and depending on what the choreographer has in mind, it might be something that evokes emotions like that. I say, we were all talking about how nice it is to be on stage and be in the moment. And I think when you are watching dance, it really demands you to pay attention and kind of slow down, which is something that we don't always do in our normal day-to-day lives. So maybe just having that opportunity to be in the moment and really connect with what's happening, maybe evoke that response. But that was really nice to hear. That's all I have right now.
I think for me, I was thinking about this a little bit after last night dancing, and sometimes it's sorry. I guess that kind of relates to my point, is that I think for me, the reason that I dance is it says so much more than words. I feel like it's all the words that I can say so much and not say anything, but dance says everything. And I think that if whatever I'm saying with my movement is touching the audience, however that is interpreted, is really meaningful to me. So that's really nice to hear.
So her question was the difference between classical and contemporary ballet. And classical ballet is obviously an art form that is very old, and so it has many forms. We have ballet from 1400s. I mean, that's really where it was started in the court. But classical ballet as we know it today is, we train in it. It's a beautiful art form based on lines, and I completely revere it. I think it's amazing. But contemporary ballet takes on elements from modern dance, elements from contemporary art forms. It opens it up. It frees the ballet art form. So, for instance, in ballet, we might do something very nicely with it, strong and nice with our feet, and our arms would have a certain position that go with it naturally. Now, you can always change that up, but in classical ballet, you would never touch the floor with your hands unless you were, a character in, maybe you were playing Rothbard or something. So contemporary ballet opens up the floor work. It opens up moving your spine differently. We often don't see, a curved spine in ballet, or it just opens up a whole new realm, I guess, is how I would explain it.
Is it almost like, classical ballet is this language. It's almost like there's this version of the language that's Latin, that's like the old language, the dead language. Not dead though, it's still used to. So now when people use it in that way, we call it neoclassical, really. Yeah, I almost didn't go out with the man who became my husband again because of this question. We went out on a date, and I had seen like 3 ballets that week, and I was so tired, and he sits down and he's like, I'm so interested in dance. Tell me, what is contemporary ballet? I was like, oh my God. I had to tell you about 30 different choreographers. I almost want to talk more about choreographers, right? Because then you were talking too about, how there becomes this sameness, and there's so much Gaga influence from Ohad Naharin's work right now. And so if you just call it contemporary choreography, right, then all these choreographers with these different voices get lumped together. And I sort of resist that in the fiber of my soul. But genre is necessary to think about what you're doing and how the audience understands what you're doing. What's your relationship to genre? How much do you want to be part of genre, contemporary ballet being a genre, or push back against it and say, no, I'm an individual voice? Do you think about that?
I don't think about that too much because you're going to be boxed no matter what you do. So, I kind of think, wherever somebody wants to place me, that's fine. But I would place myself in this piece in the contemporary ballet realm. I wouldn't push back against it too much. Because why? I guess that's not me per se.
How about different contemporary choreographers that you're influenced by?
Certainly. So William Forsythe has definitely influenced my work. Merce Cunningham is a modern choreographer, but I absolutely adore his work and find ways to use Cunningham references in my dance pieces all the time. He was another eye-opening choreographer. When I first started dancing Cunningham work, I thought, wow, I missed my calling as a dancer. I wish I would have auditioned for him. I was a little bit young for that. But I take these 2 choreographers as big reference points for how I want to choreograph, and then I run with it and I put my spice into it, my voice, because I think if someone from the outside were to watch that piece and say, and then view a Cunningham piece, would they see anything that's related? Maybe not. But it does influence the way I work and the way I create and the way I have the dancers move.
Great. Another question from the audience.
Traci, I'm wondering, you said that your piece was shown in Minneapolis and now it's shown here. Where does your piece go now?
It's a great question. I would love to have it put up again, maybe in the spring, or take it on tour. I certainly would write grants for hopefully funding for that. I don't want my work to die, so I would love for it to be put up again and to keep creating new work.
But how do you do that? I mean, how do you go to just put it out there? Or would somebody be willing to produce this, or do you go pick a company that you think would be appropriate for the work?
That's a great question. Being with Nathan in Mannequin Theater and Dance, we have the capability of producing it here whenever we have the funding to do so. So that's incredibly helpful because we have a space and we have a space in which we can produce it. So that was probably the easiest way. It still needs funding though, so we still have to pay the dancers to rehearse the piece. Maybe I want to change something about it, but overall I'm really satisfied with it. So that's probably the easiest way to keep putting it up. There are ways in which companies ask for choreographers, especially women choreographers, to send in pieces, and you can get chosen to put up your work at different companies. I haven't gone down that realm yet, but I would love to. If someone commissioned this piece for, San Francisco Ballet, I would certainly say yes. But we'll see where it goes from here.
How are we doing on time? Okay.
So I know you said that you had like a freelance of being able to decide what you wanted to do. You've done multiple plays yourself of going from one side of the spectrum to the other. Were you the one that put all the music together and everything for this play that we watched?
Yes. So I started with a Spotify playlist of some of the ideas I was meandering, thinking over, and I would listen to that playlist 24/7. And the ones that were calling to me, I would listen to more and more, and then bring them into the studio with me. And in the end, I started improvising to Poulenc's music and another composer, and I didn't like the direction I was going with the other composer, so I ended up with this one, and I used his full flute sonata. So this 12-minute piece is the complete Francis Poulenc flute sonata number 264 or something like that. And the only change I made to it is I reversed the first and the second piece, but it's his complete flute sonata.
You did a really good choice because it's like she was saying at the very beginning, just the sound of that flute. I mean, it just kind of put an evanescence around us, and I thought it was beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. I think that's a wonderful final comment to end on. I also loved your use of that music, and I felt an emotional shift as soon as the dance started. So thank you, everyone. Thank you.